The first encounter. Jake was just a mechanic, a human from Earth, working on alien tech at the joint military base on planet Zareen 5. The base was shared by humans and the Zarnak warriors, a powerful alien race known for their strength, discipline, and complete lack of humor. Jake didn't mind the aliens. Most ignored him. Some looked down on humans, but he stayed quiet and fixed whatever they gave him. He liked peace, he liked machines. He did not like attention. But one day, all of that changed. Jake was in the hangar, fixing a damaged plasma rifle. The place was quiet, except for the sound of drills and energy tools. Then he heard footsteps. Heavy. Sharp. Confident. He looked up. She entered, an alien warrior, tall, strong, her armor dark like shadow metal, glowing softly with blue lines. Her skin was smooth and silver blue, her eyes bright violet. She walked like she owned the floor, and maybe she did. The Zarnak respected strength, and she was clearly one of their best. Jake blinked. "Wow," he whispered, barely loud enough for even himself to hear. "She's got a nice—" He stopped. He hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it was too late. The alien warrior froze. Slowly, her head turned. Her violet eyes locked on him. Jake's heart dropped. She began to walk toward him. "Oh no," he muttered. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She just walked, each step like thunder in his chest. Jake stood frozen near the workbench. He could hear his own heartbeat. Why did he say it? Why now? She stopped inches away. "You speak of my form?" she asked. Her voice was deep, calm but dangerous. Jake tried to explain. I didn't mean, well, it was just, sorry." Slap. Her hand moved like lightning. The slap hit Jake's cheek with the force of a small explosion. He flew sideways and crashed into a metal crate. Tools clattered everywhere. "Ow," he groaned, holding his face. That hurt. But then he looked up and saw something strange. The warrior's face was changing. Her silver blue skin on the cheeks turned slightly purple. Her lips tightened. Her eyes flicked away. Then, back at him, she was blushing. Jake stared. "Wait, did you just blush?" She turned her back quickly. "Speak again, human, and I will end your tongue," she said sharply. Then she stormed out of the hangar. Jake sat there stunned. He was in pain, sure, but more confused than anything. He had heard Zarnak warriors didn't even have emotions like humans. They weren't supposed to feel embarrassment or care about compliments. So why did she blush? As Jake rubbed his burning cheek, the door opened again. His friend Sam, another human engineer, walked in. "Dude, what happened?" Sam asked, eyes wide. "Did someone hit you with a hammer?" "Worse," Jake muttered. "An alien hand." Sam helped him up. "Wait, was it her?" "Yeah," Jake nodded. "The Shadow Blade," Sam whispered. "That's Kaleri. She's a legend. She fought alone against 30 rebels last year. Took them all down." Jake winced. "Well, now she's added me to the list." Sam laughed. "You must have said something real stupid." "I did," Jake admitted. "But I think she blushed." Sam stopped laughing. "Blushed? No way. Zarnak warriors don't blush. They don't do feelings, remember?" Jake looked toward the door where Kaleri had left. His cheek still hurt, but his curiosity was stronger. "I saw it," he said. "She turned purple." Sam shook his head. "Man, you better stay away from her. That slap was a warning." Jake didn't say anything. He kept thinking about her eyes, the way she paused, the way she looked back for just a second. Maybe it was a warning, or maybe it was something else. He didn't know it yet, but that one compliment, that one moment, had already changed both their lives, and neither of them could go back now. Next morning, Jake woke up with a dull pain in his cheek and a strange heat behind his eyes. He sat up on the bunk inside his tiny quarters, groaning as he touched the mark on his face. The slap had not only left a bruise, but a strange memory too. The image of Kaliri's glowing violet eyes, filled with something between rage and shame. Or was it something else? He wasn't sure anymore. He pulled on his jumpsuit and stepped out into the hallway. Everything looked normal. Soldiers walking, engineers talking, machines buzzing. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When he returned from breakfast, he noticed something strange on the wall above his bed. At first, he thought it was just a burn mark, but as he stepped closer, his stomach dropped. Letters, sharp and black, had been seared into the wall's metal surface. It read, "Speak again, and I will silence you forever." Jake's eyes widened. He didn't know if he should laugh or start packing his bag to leave the planet. "She really burned a death threat into my wall?" he whispered, half impressed, half terrified. He rushed out and found Sam in the hangar. Sam had just finished welding a stabilizer when Jake grabbed his sleeve. "She left a message. On my wall. Burned it into the steel." Sam raised his brow. "Kaliri?" Jake nodded. "Dude, what did I tell you? Sarnak warriors don't forget. If she warned you, take it seriously. Their threats are usually final." Jake rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly feeling colder. "But she didn't kill me yesterday. Just slapped me." Sam gave him a look. "Maybe because you surprised her, but trust me, the next time she might not use her hand." Jake tried to go back to work, but his mind kept spinning. Every echo in the hallway made him jump. Every time a heavy footstep came near, his pulse jumped. He avoided the training yard. He avoided the canteen during Zarnak mealtimes. But late that evening, while heading back to the dorms, he heard a sound coming from behind a storage crate near the back of the hangar. Heavy breathing, and the faint sound of metal clinking. Curiosity, or maybe stupidity, pulled him toward it. He peeked around the crate and froze. Kaliri was there, sitting alone on a metal bench, sharpening a long blade slowly. Her armor was off. She wore only a black undersuit, and her arms shimmered under the dim light. She hadn't noticed him yet. For a second, Jake considered turning back, but his foot slipped against a wrench, and it clanged loudly. Kaliri's head snapped up, her eyes glowed. "You again," she growled, rising to her feet. Jake held up his hands. "I wasn't spying, I swear. I was just passing by," and before he could finish, she crossed the space between them in seconds and slammed him against the crate, one arm across his chest, one hand gripping the blade. "Do you want death, human?" she hissed. "Do your kind always walk toward danger?" Jake didn't struggle. He looked her in the eyes. "No, I didn't mean to sneak up on you. I just wanted to talk. Maybe to say sorry again." Kaliri's jaw tightened. "Sorry is weakness. You speak too freely. You look at me too boldly. You say words no warrior should hear." Jake blinked. "You mean compliments?" Her violet eyes narrowed. "You do not understand my people. We are made to fight, not to feel. What you said, it exposed me." "That is not forgiven," Jake swallowed. "But you didn't kill me." She stared at him for a moment, then slowly stepped back, lowering her blade. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I should have." Jake noticed her breathing had changed. Her hand, still gripping the weapon, trembled ever so slightly. "But you didn't," he said again. "Maybe you didn't want to." Kaliri turned sharply. "Do not follow me again." And then she vanished into the corridor, silent as a shadow. Jake exhaled, slowly sinking down against the crate. His legs felt weak. His chest was pounding, but his mind was racing faster. There was something behind her eyes. Something more than just anger. She could have ended him in one move, but she didn't. Twice now. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing. He had her attention now, and whatever came next, he wasn't walking away. Not yet. The next day started like any other, but Jake's nerves were tighter than usual. The warning Kaliri gave him was still fresh in his mind. Most people would have avoided her forever after what happened, but Jake wasn't like most people. He didn't understand why, but something about the way her hands trembled and her voice softened at the end. It made him want to know her more, not because she was dangerous, but because she wasn't just dangerous. There was more beneath that armor, behind those glowing violet eyes. Still, when he was called to deliver a set of newly repaired combat gauntlets to the training yard, his heart sank. That's where Kaliri trained. And sure enough, when he stepped through the doors, he saw her. She was in the center of the yard, surrounded by other Zarnak warriors, teaching them blade movements. Her hair was pulled back tight, her armor polished like obsidian glass, and her focus was sharp as a knife. Jake tried to stay quiet, placing the gauntlets on the supply table, but her eyes found him in seconds. She didn't say a word, didn't move. Just stared. Jake gave a small nod and turned to leave, but a deep Zarnak voice shouted something from behind. One of the younger trainees had accidentally dropped his weapon. Kaliri barked something in her native language and pointed to the practice dummies lined up on the far side. The warriors all moved into position. They were practicing live blade throws now. Jake knew he should leave, but his curiosity, as always, betrayed him. He stopped at the edge of the yard and watched. One by one, the Zarnak warriors hurled their blades with deadly force. Each blade struck its target. Then Kaliri stepped forward and took aim. She didn't look at the dummy. She looked at him. Just for a breath, then she threw. The blade whistled through the air, but not at the dummy. It landed inches from Jake's left boot, vibrating in the dirt. He froze. The entire yard went silent. Kaliri walked toward him slowly, her steps calm, controlled. She stopped just a few feet away, eyes never leaving his. Jake tried to speak, but no sound came. Then, to his surprise, her lips curled into something new. A smile. Cold. Confident. Dangerous. Reflex test, she said simply, then turned back to her warriors. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The others went back to training, but his hands were shaking. That blade could have killed him, no doubt about it, but it didn't. It missed on purpose, and worse, it felt like a message, a reminder she's watching. She doesn't forget. Later, as Jake walked out of the yard, he passed by one of the high-ranking human officers, Colonel Marin. The colonel gave him a hard stare. "You know you're not supposed to linger during their combat drills," he said. Jake shrugged. "Just delivering gear." "Keep your distance from Kaliri," Marin warned. "She may be under treaty protection, but she's not like us. You don't want to get too close." Jake didn't answer. He kept walking, but the words stayed with him. Too close. That was the warning everyone seemed to repeat. But Jake wasn't trying to get close, was he? That night he couldn't sleep. The image of her staring before she threw the blade played over and over in his head. Was it a threat? A joke? A challenge? He didn't know. And the not knowing was driving him mad. Just before dawn, he grabbed his datapad and began reading Zarnak culture files. Everything was cold, brutal, warrior-based. Honor, discipline, survival. But no mention of smiling. No mention of blushing. No mention of any response to compliments. So why her? The next day, Jake walked through the base with a new idea, testing the line. Not to provoke her, but to understand her. And then, as if fate was listening, he saw her again in the corridor near the weapon vault. She was alone. He slowed his steps. "Hey, he said carefully. She turned her head, her expression unreadable. "Thanks for not aiming for my face," he added with a small grin. Kaliri blinked once, then stepped forward fast. Before he could react, her hand was at his throat, pinning him lightly to the wall, but not tight enough to cut off air. Her face was inches from his. "You joke again, and I will not miss next time," she whispered, but her voice, it wasn't hard. It was soft, like a warning she didn't want to give. Jake nodded, heart racing. She let go. As she walked away, Jake touched his neck, feeling the heat from her fingers still there. Whatever this was, it wasn't war. It wasn't peace either. It was something in between, something sharp, something dangerous, and maybe something real. The base went dark for 3 full seconds. Just 3, but long enough to feel like forever. Jake stood frozen, under a flickering hallway light, staring at the ceiling as the emergency sirens began to wail. Red strobes lit up the corridors. A voice on the intercom shouted, "Power core unstable, containment breach possible. Engineers to reactor room immediately." Jake didn't think. He dropped his datapad and ran. His boots pounded the metal floor as the base shook beneath him. He was an engineer, trained for moments like this. But this wasn't just a loose wire or overheated coil. This was a full-scale meltdown, and something told him they didn't have much time. When he reached the reactor room, heat slammed into his face like a wall. Sparks flew from control panels and a steady high-pitched alarm rang in his ears. 2 other human techs were already inside, yelling at each other over the noise. One was trying to shut down the cooling cycle. The other was bleeding from a burn on his arm. The air was thick, heavy with smoke and heat. Jake pulled on gloves, grabbed a toolkit, and rushed toward the backup console. That's when he saw the damaged plasma valve, hanging loose, sparking wildly. One wrong touch and the whole core would blow. He didn't hesitate. Jake jumped over the safety railing and crawled toward the valve. He reached it just as it burst. A shock wave of heat and gas shot out, and he was thrown backward. His head hit metal. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, everything was blurry. His ears rang, and then a shadow. She was there. Kaliri. She stepped through the smoke like a storm, walking on 2 legs, armor glowing with streaks of blue light. Without a word, she reached for him, pulled him up like he weighed nothing, and shielded him with her body. Another blast came, hotter, louder, but it hit her, not him. They dropped to the ground behind a shield barrier as the fire suppression systems kicked in. Jake coughed hard, eyes wide as he looked at her. She had taken the hit. The blast had burned through parts of her shoulder plate and left raw marks on her skin. She was hurt. He saw her jaw tighten as she pushed herself upright. Then she looked down at him, expression unreadable. But those violet eyes were softer this time. "You're crazy," Jake whispered through his coughs. "You came back in for me?" She didn't answer. She stood slowly, one hand pressing to her shoulder. "You could have died," he said, struggling to his feet. Still nothing. Then she turned her head slightly and muttered, "You are mine to kill, not a reactor." It was said like a threat, but the way her voice cracked at the end told him otherwise. Medical teams rushed in behind them, and Kaliri moved away without a word. Jake reached after her, but she was gone before his fingers could touch her arm. Hours later, Jake lay in the medbay, bruised but stable. The doctor cleared him with minor burns and a mild concussion. He didn't care. His mind kept playing that moment again and again, her body covering his, her face, inches from his, her eyes not filled with hate, but something else. That night, Jake slipped out of his room and walked toward the observation deck. It was quiet there, no noise, just stars through the transparent dome. And that's when he saw her. Kaliri stood alone, her arms crossed, armor removed. She wore a long, dark tunic instead. Her injured shoulder was bandaged. Her hair was loose, long, smooth, silver like starlight. She didn't look like a warrior now. She looked like a person. A tired one. He stepped closer. She didn't move. "I wanted to say thank you," Jake said gently. No reply. "I know you. Didn't have to save me. You could have let me die." Kaliri exhaled slowly. It was not a choice. Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked at him now. "I did not think. My body moved. That is all." "But why?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed. "I do not know, and I do not like it." Jake stepped beside her, staring out at the stars. "Maybe that's the human part of you." "There is no human part of me," she snapped. "Then why do you blush?" Kaleri turned sharply, ready to snap again, but stopped. Something broke, in her face like a crack in armor. "I was not made to feel," she said quietly. "I was made to fight, but around you, things change." Jake smiled gently. "That doesn't sound like weakness to me." Kaleri looked away. "To my people, it is." "To me," Jake whispered, "it means you're alive." She didn't speak again. But she didn't leave either. They stood in silence, staring into the stars. Two warriors from different worlds, connected by one broken rule and one shared moment. Jake didn't see her for 2 days. After the incident in the reactor room and that quiet moment under the stars, Kaleri disappeared. No training sessions, no patrols, no hallway encounters. It was like she had vanished into the shadows she was named after. He asked a few soldiers, but no one gave him a clear answer. Some just looked nervous when he mentioned her name. One Zarnak guard simply said, "She is correcting herself." Jake didn't know what that meant, but it didn't sound good. Something had changed between them. He felt it. Not just because she had saved his life. Not just because she had let her guard down. It was the way she looked at him in silence, like she was fighting a war inside herself. A war worse than any fought with weapons. On the third night, Jake stayed late in the hangar to work on a damaged drone. It kept his hands busy, but his thoughts still drifted back to her. The way her voice softened. The way she looked almost afraid to feel. As he reached for a tool, he heard a quiet sound behind him. Bare feet on metal. He turned sharply and froze. Kaleri stood in the shadows near the back wall, her face partly hidden by her long silver hair. She wasn't in armor, just a sleeveless black tunic, her skin glowing faintly under the low lights. "I thought you left," Jake said quietly, surprised. "I was removed from duty," she replied, her voice low. "Because of what happened?" She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Because I lost control." Jake placed the tool down and faced her. "You didn't lose control. You saved a life." "To you that means something," she said, her eyes glowing faintly. "To my kind, that is dishonor." Jake frowned. "But you did the right thing." Kaleri looked away, jaw tight. "I acted on emotion. I risked mission integrity. That is weakness." He took a careful step forward. "Then I guess I'm weak too. Because when I saw you hurt, I didn't care about orders either. I just cared about you." Her head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "Do not say things you do not understand." "I do understand," Jake said firmly. "You think you're not supposed to feel, but you do feel, don't you?" Kaleri didn't speak. Jake took another step, slower this time. "You saved me not out of duty, but because something inside you told you I mattered. You could have walked away. You didn't." She looked at him, and for the first time there was no coldness in her stare. No warning. Just conflict. "I do not know what this is," she admitted. "You speak words that twist my thoughts. I was trained to be steel, but around you I turned soft." Jake gave a small smile. "There's nothing wrong with being soft. It means you're real. Alive." Kaleri moved closer until only a breath separated them. Her hand slowly reached up, not to strike, not to push, but to touch his chest, just over his heart. Her fingers were warm and shaking slightly. "This," she whispered, "this sound, I heard it when I carried you from the fire. It was loud, wild. It is loud now too." Jake swallowed. "That's called a heartbeat." She tilted her head. "It is yours, but I feel it in me too." They stood like that for a long moment. Quiet, fragile, unreal. Then Kaleri stepped back. "This connection," she said, voice firmer now, "cannot exist. If my commanders learn of it, they will strip me of my rank." Jake's face tightened. "So what? Rank or not, you're still you. Isn't that worth something?" "To me," she said, glancing down. "I do not know yet." He wanted to reach out to take her hand, but he held back. Something told him she wasn't ready. Not yet. Why did you slap me that first day? He asked, changing the subject. Softly, Kaliri's lips twitched. Because I did not know what else to do. Your words made me feel seen. Exposed. I panicked. Jake chuckled lightly. Well, it was the most painful compliment I've ever given. For the first time, a real smile broke across her lips. It was small, barely there. But it was real. Do not say it again, she warned playfully. Jake raised his hands. No promises. Kaliri turned to leave, but before she walked away, she paused. You are still mine to kill, she said without turning back. Jake laughed. I'll take that as a compliment this time. And then she was gone, like smoke slipping through cracks. But this time, Jake didn't feel uncertain. She had returned, not as a threat, but as someone willing to understand herself. And maybe him too. Whatever this was between them, spoken or not, it was no longer just a mystery. It had become a truth. Kaliri stood alone in the edge chamber of the observation wing. Her arms crossed behind her back, her face lit by the silver light of the twin moons hanging outside the transparent dome. She had not slept. Sleep was weakness. At least that's what she had been taught. But the war inside her now was not the kind that could be won by blades or silence. It was the kind that echoed in her chest when Jake spoke. The kind that burned behind her eyes when he smiled. The kind that made her forget everything she had been trained to become. She closed her eyes, trying to force her thoughts into order, but it was no use. The memory of his voice, his heartbeat, the warmth of his presence, all of it haunted her like a song she couldn't unhear. Jake found her by accident, or maybe fate led him there. He had taken to wandering the quiet parts of the base at night, not to look for her, but because the silence helped him breathe. But when he saw her there, lit by moonlight and shadows, something inside him moved. She didn't turn when he approached, but he knew she was aware. You always find the loneliest places, he said gently. I was born in silence, she replied, without looking. He stepped beside her, keeping just enough space not to threaten her calm. I've been thinking about that first day. When I said what I said, her eyes stayed forward. You mean when you called attention to my structure? Jake chuckled nervously. Yeah, that. I didn't mean to offend you. It just slipped out. But what I can't stop thinking about is that you blushed. Kaliri's face tightened and she finally turned her head to him. I should have ended you for seeing that. But you didn't, he said softly. Why? She was silent for a long time. Then slowly she spoke. Our kind, we are taught to master every reaction. Anger is allowed, pride is expected, but embarrassment, emotion, attraction? She shook her head. Those are signs of instability. They are punishable, Jake frowned. Punishable? For what? Being alive? Kaliri gave a bitter smile. I was trained to be a perfect weapon. The moment a Zarnak warrior shows softness, they are removed from elite ranks. When I was young, I laughed once during combat training. I was beaten. I did not laugh again. Jake's chest tightened. He had always known the Zarnak were strict, but he hadn't realized how deep the control went. So when you blushed, you were scared. Yes, she said. Not of you, of me, of what I had become. Jake stepped a little closer. But maybe what you became is better. She looked at him, confused. He continued. You saved me. You protected someone you didn't have to. You opened up. That's not weakness. That's strength. Because it means you had to fight your own training just to do it. Kaliri looked away again, but her voice was softer now. When you spoke to me that day, it felt like I was not just a warrior. I was a female, a being. And no one had ever seen me like that before. Jake smiled gently. I did. I still do. She turned to him fully now, and something in her face shifted, not just confusion, not just curiosity, something deeper, raw and unshielded. You say these things easily, she said, but they change everything inside me. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't. His fingers touched her hand, cool, strong, but trembling. Maybe that change is exactly what you need. Her voice was barely a whisper. But if I keep feeling like this, I may lose who I am. Jake met her eyes. Or maybe you'll finally find out who you really are. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't cold, it was warm. It was full. Kaliri slowly pulled her hand away, not in rejection, but as if afraid of what more touch might bring. She turned her face back toward the stars. If my commanders learn I feel this way for a human, they will exile me. Jake's heart beat louder. Then let them. You deserve to live your truth. Kaliri closed her eyes. I do not know what my truth is anymore. Jake leaned forward, voice low. I think it's starting here. She opened her eyes, her voice shaking. My kind do not blush for nothing. When it happens, it means our blood has marked the one we cannot fight. Jake blinked. Marked? She nodded. You. Then, without warning, she leaned forward and rested her forehead gently against his. Not a kiss. Not yet. But more powerful than anything before. It was not surrender. It was acceptance. And in that moment, under the moons, surrounded by silence, the fearsome alien warrior who once slapped him for a compliment finally let her guard fall, not with weapons, but with a truth deeper than duty. The base felt different now. People still walked the same halls, machines still buzzed, and orders were still barked through the comms. But to Jake, everything had shifted. Ever since that quiet moment under the moons, when Kaliri leaned, her forehead to his world no longer felt cold. He hadn't seen her since then, not properly. She had returned to her duties as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He noticed the way her gaze found his in crowded halls, how her footsteps paused ever so slightly when she heard his voice. She was still the fearsome warrior to everyone else, still sharp, strict, untouchable, but to him, she had become something more. And he had become something to her too, though she would never admit it aloud. That morning, the entire base gathered in the central combat hall. It was the Zarnak elite's final demonstration before their rotation ended. Kaliri stood at the front, commanding every eye in the room. Her armor gleamed, freshly cleaned and battle-scarred. She looked as if she were carved from steel and fire. Jake stood at the back watching silently, heart pounding with every breath. He hadn't planned anything. But when her eyes swept the crowd and landed on his, something bold sparked inside him. A sudden urge to remind her that even warriors deserve to feel. Kaliri stepped forward, giving commands to her team. They began a synchronized blade dance, sharp, fast, deadly. Metal sang in the air as they moved. The audience watched in silence, awe painted across their faces. Jake felt his throat dry as he stared. She was like a storm wrapped in grace, and suddenly the words were in his mouth before he could stop them. Still got the nicest butt on the base, he said, loudly, clearly, and it echoed. Every head turned. Every Zarnak warrior froze mid-movement. Kaliri stopped dead in her tracks. The silence was deafening. Jake blinked, too late to take it back. Kaliri's eyes met his, wide and burning. For a moment the entire room held its breath, waiting for her to explode, to charge, to draw her blade and strike. But she didn't. Instead, Kaliri marched across the combat hall with sharp, terrifying steps, toward him. Her team didn't follow. No one dared breathe. Jake felt heat crawl up his neck but didn't look away. She reached him in seconds, her face unreadable, eyes locked on his. She stopped just inches away, and then, without warning, she grabbed him by the collar, lifted him off the floor, and kissed him. Hard. Gasps erupted from the audience. The moment stretched, the base frozen in disbelief. Even the guards by the doors looked stunned. Then, Kaliri set him down slowly, her hand still gripping his collar, Her eyes were sharp, but her cheeks glowing deep violet. She leaned in close and whispered, "Your words still shame me." Jake smiled, dazed. "Didn't stop you from kissing me." Her lips twitched. "That was to shut you up." "Can I make more comments then?" he joked. She let go of his collar, with a slight push that made him stumble back, but he was grinning like a fool. Kailiri turned back toward the center of the hall, then raised her voice. "The human has spoken, the matter is settled, resume training." Her soldiers obeyed instantly, though their expression said otherwise. Some Zarnak looked confused, some shocked. One even dropped his blade in disbelief. Jake, meanwhile, just stood there, slightly bruised, definitely breathless, and more alive than ever. He had kissed an elite alien warrior in front of everyone, and somehow lived. After the session, Sam found him leaning against a wall outside the hall. "What was that?" Sam asked, eyes wide. Jake laughed. "I don't even know, but it was worth it." "Dude," Sam whispered, "she kissed you in full view of 3 generals and the entire alien squad." Jake shrugged, still smiling. "Well, I guess she finally stopped hiding." Later that night, Kailiri found him again, alone in the repair bay. This time, no armor, no weapons, just her and that strange calm she only showed around him. She stepped close and said, "I should be punished for what I did." Jake looked at her. "Then punish me too. I started it." She paused. "But I do not regret it." He reached out, touching her hand gently. "Neither do I." Kailiri exhaled slowly. "You have ruined me." Jake grinned. "Or maybe I've freed you." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded. "Perhaps both." And just like that, the fearsome alien warrior, the one they all feared, allowed herself one more blush. Not from shame, but from something far more dangerous. Love.